So it's the custom in Australia to start any presentation with acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting and to pay respect to elders past and present. So I'd like to extend the same courtesy to the First Nations people of Canada and through this area. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak and to share some of the experiences in Australia. And being here today and listening to very powerful speakers from BC ACOM, we have a lot of things in common, unfortunately. So my story, and I apologise if I use notes, I'm really tired and jet lagged, so I need some prompts so I don't run off and say some weird things that's been happening during the day. So my story to share with you tonight is to start with a question. Why should we worry about the delivery of methadone in Australia? What are we whinging about? In Australia, methadone is publicly subsidised, though there are some fees for some people. Our national drug strategy recognises harm reduction. Needle and syringe programs are legal and run by and as health services. Drug user organisations are funded by government. And we have a safer injecting facility that's established, protected and now enabled by law. Australia takes pride in itself as being a founding member of the United Nations and congratulates itself on being a signatory to almost all of the major instruments relating to human rights. An embarrassment of riches. What is there to complain about when we consider other countries where people who use drugs are executed or are forced into compulsory treatment centres run like labour camps? What have we got to complain about? What I want to argue is that Australia and Canada are exactly the right places to consider how our structures, the legal system, the health system, corrections, they create ways of delivering methadone and create the experiences of being on methadone. The policies and bureaucracies of these systems and the assumptions that underlie them are so closely aligned to social conventions that they may not be visible as violations of the rights of people on methadone or as contributing to the further harm experienced by people on methadone. This is referred to in the social research literature as structural violence. To illustrate this, I'm going to tell you two stories. One I witnessed firsthand and the other I collected as part of a research project. In the first instance, I travelled with a group of people to a conference in India. Beautiful, lovely, and very privileged to do so. But on the way home, our flight was delayed, and we live in Australia, it's a long way from anywhere. And you know, a flight delay can result in a trip of a day becoming 2 or 3 days marathon. You know, annoying and inconvenient, but not very dramatic for most people, except if you're travelling as a methadone client. And one member of the group I was travelling with had only her exact dose of methadone for travelling and no extra for things going wrong like flights being delayed. The stress experienced by this person as she strategised with her friends in the airport and by phone with her partner in Australia was excruciating. Her choices were to wait and go into withdrawal on the plane, or go out into the streets of a developing country city where methadone was not legal in the early hours of the morning to score drugs and injecting equipment to stave off withdrawals until she arrived home in Australia. Now, what kind of system is this when we live in civilised places like Australia and Canada? What kind of system do we have that puts people with so little power into such ridiculously risky situations? And the speakers from BCA tonight put those words, those exact same experiences into words within their own country. It's ridiculous. What do we ask of these people? You know, and in the case of my colleague in the airport in India, only the emotional and practical support of her friends emptying out their pockets of whatever medication they had on them carried this person home. However, this was a situation in which years of hard work to achieve and maintain non-illicit drug use could have so easily been imperilled. The second story comes from a research project where we were investigating people's perceptions of how they thought they acquired hepatitis C. And Jasmine, a fake name obviously, talked about her experience in lockup, again very similar to the experience described before. So she spent 3 days at Her Majesty's pleasure in Sydney. And she was on a methadone program and was not provided any methadone during the 3 days that she was in the lockup. And as soon as she was let out, her partner met her and brought with her a vial of methadone. And Jasmine said to her partner, "You haven't been using this, have you?" And the partner said no. But the partner, she believes the partner had, and so she injected from the bottle of methadone, and she believed that that methadone was contaminated with blood, and that's how she acquired hepatitis C. Now, Australia recognises the conventions surrounding the rights of prisoners, including access to healthcare as a standard equivalent to that in the community. Australia recognises that methadone is an essential medicine as determined by the World Health Organisation. Yet even with all these structural supports in place, methadone has only limited claims as a legitimate health service. And in prison and in Jasmine's case in short-term lockup, these international agreements appear to have no impact whatsoever. It was just luck that we found Jasmine and she agreed to be part of our study. Our data collection systems in Australia are not looking for the harms that methadone may cause. Our data collection systems are not sophisticated enough to make the link between the lack of methadone in short-term lockup and the acquisition of hepatitis C. No one knows or cares about Jasmine's story. And in fact, it's easy to discredit her and her story. There's only one risk in a chaotic life, to use that terrible term, and that's an easy out for the prison and the detention systems to wash their hands of any responsibility they may have in prompting the situation that may lead to Jasmine's acquisition of hepatitis C. These two instances, and just the tiny tip of the iceberg, they're unacceptable. And as researchers, we're supposed to be impartial and objective, to remain at a distance from what we're studying. But we are human, and by virtue of our jobs, we have the privilege, sometimes the very tragic privilege, of witnessing inequity and harm firsthand. Drug user organisations in Australia and groups like BCAPOM have been saying the same thing for years, decades in Australia. But these accounts are too easy to discredit, and unfortunately, as a white, educated, middle-class, non-drug injecting subject, my voice is sometimes louder and more credible. I guess that's the one learning that I can bring here, is the great partnership that we have built between researchers and drug user organisations in Australia. We really rely on each other as colleagues and collude behind the scenes as allies. To make a final point, I want to draw a comparison between two arms of drug treatment, that for tobacco dependence and that for opiate dependence. Now, how we celebrate the intentions and achievements of people trying to quit smoking cigarettes. Look, here's a new product to choose from, designed to provide you another option to suit your personal preference for quitting smoking. And we understand that your preference may change from one quit attempt to another. People who try to give up smoking are doing a positive thing for their health and society. Let's, as a society, praise them and throw resources from public, non-government and commercial sectors at them. Yet for people who are dependent on opiates and who similarly try to prioritise their health, their endeavours are not so celebrated. As people seek access to methadone, they move into a highly regulated and frequently punitive state. The details of their daily lives are scrutinised and tragically and ironically creating the possibility for further cumulative, cascading, compounding harms. And again, we have that personal experience that absolutely describes that so well. Yes, we live in a relatively liberal paradise. People who use drugs are not shot in this country or in mine. But to say we are good by international standards does not mean that our methadone systems are good enough. And to pretend otherwise, to pretend that there are no structural forces acting to make the lives of people on methadone worse, fails to recognise that people on methadone are citizens with rights to the highest attainable standards of health and rights to claim those that highest attainable standards of health. I really feel I don't have much to tell you. This organisation here, the strength of numbers on the ground tonight is your power. Build allies with people who do have credible voices, and unfortunately that power differential exists and will exist so long as we have prohibition ruling my country and yours and the rest of the world. Thank you very much for the time tonight.